The Eagle and the Crow. A crow watched an eagle swoop with a majestic air from a cliff upon a flock of sheep and carry away a lamb in his talons. The whole thing looked so graceful and so easy that the crow at once proceeded to imitate it, and pouncing upon the back of the largest and fattest ram he could see, he tried to make off with it. He found that he could not move the ram, and his claws got so entangled in the animal's fleece that he could not get away himself. He therefore became an easy prey to the shepherd, who, coming up at that time, caught him, cut his wings, and gave him to his children for a plaything. They came crowding about their father and asked him what strange bird that was. "Why," said he, "he'll tell you himself that he's an eagle, but you take my word for it. I know him to be a crow." Lesson: 'Tis folly to attempt what you are unable to perform. The Owl and the Nightingale. A formal, solemn owl had for many years made his habitation in a grove amongst the ruins of an old monastery, and had pored so often over some mouldy manuscripts, the stupid relics of a monkish library, that he grew infected with the pride and pedantry of the place. Mistaking gravity for wisdom, he would sit whole days with his eyes half shut, fancying himself profoundly learned. It happened as he sat one evening, half buried in meditation and half in sleep, that a nightingale, unluckily perched near him, began her melodious lays. He started from his reverie, and with a horrid screech interrupted her song. "Begone," cried he, "thou impertinent minstrel, nor distract with noisy dissonance my sublime contemplations, and know, vain songster, that harmony consists in truth alone, which is gained by laborious study, and not in languishing notes, fit only to soothe the ear of a lovesick maid." "Conceited pedant," returned the nightingale, "whose wisdom lies only in the feathers that muffle up thy unmeaning face. Music is a natural and rational entertainment, and though not adapted to the ears of an owl, has ever been relished and admired by the best formed minds." Lesson: It is natural for a pedant to despise those arts that polished our manners, and that would extirpate pedantry. The Spider and the Silkworm. A spider, busied in spreading his web from one side of the room to the other, was asked by an industrious silkworm to what end he spent so much time and labor in making such a number of lines and circles. The spider angrily replied, "Do not disturb me, thou ignorant thing. I transmit my ingenuity to posterity, and fame is the object of my wishes." Just as he had spoken, Susan, the chambermaid, coming into the room to feed her silkworms, saw the spider at his work, and with one stroke of her broom swept him away and destroyed at once his labors and his hopes of fame. Lesson: He that is employed in works of use generally advantages himself or others, while he who toils for fame alone must often expect to lose his labor. Caesar and the Slave. During a visit that Tiberius Caesar paid to one of his country residences, he observed that, whenever he walked in the grounds, a certain slave was always a little way ahead of him, busily watering the paths. Turn which way he would, go where he might, there was the fellow still fussing about with his watering pot. He felt sure that he was making himself thus needlessly officious, in the hope of thereby gaining his liberty. In making a slave free, a part of the ceremony consisted in giving him a gentle stroke on one side of the face. Hence, when the man came running up in eager expectation at the call of the emperor, the latter said to him, "I have for a long time observed you meddling where you had nothing to do, and while you might have been better employed elsewhere. You are mistaken if you think I can afford a box on the ear at so low a price as you bid for it." Lesson: Being busy does not always mean being useful. The Man and the Lion. A man and a lion once argued together as to which belonged to the nobler race. The man called the attention of the lion to a monument on which was sculptured a man striding over a fallen lion. "That proves nothing at all," said the lion. "If a lion had been the carver, he would have made the lion striding over the man." Lesson: Men are but sorry witnesses in their own cause. The Ox and the Frog. An ox grazing in a meadow chanced to set his foot on a young frog and crushed him to death. His brothers and sisters who were playing near at once ran to tell their mother what had happened. "The monster that did it, mother, was such a size," said they. The mother, who was a vain old thing, thought that she could easily make herself as large. "Was it as big as this?" she said, blowing and puffing out herself. "Oh, much bigger than that," replied the young frogs. "As this, then?" cried she, puffing and blowing again with all her might. "Nay, mother," said they, "if you were to try it till you burst yourself, you would never be so big." The silly old frog tried to puff herself out still more, and burst herself indeed. Lesson: people are ruined by attempting a greatness to which they have no claim. The Fox and the Cat. A fox and a cat traveling together beguiled the tediousness of their journey by moralizing. "Of all the moral virtues," exclaimed the fox, "mercy is surely the noblest. What say you, my sage friend? Is it not so?" "Undoubtedly," replied the cat, with a most demure countenance. "Nothing is more becoming in a creature of any sensibility than compassion." While they were thus complimenting each other on the wisdom of their views, a wolf darted out from a wood upon a flock of sheep, which were feeding in an adjacent meadow, and, without being in the least affected by the piteous cries of a poor lamb, devoured it before their eyes. "Horrible cruelty!" exclaimed the cat. "Why does he not feed on vermin instead of making his barbarous meals on such innocent creatures?" The fox agreed with his friend in the observation, to which he had added some very pathetic remarks on the odiousness of such conduct. Their indignation was rising in its warmth and zeal when they arrived at a little cottage by the wayside, where the tender-hearted fox immediately cast his eye upon a fine cock that was strutting about in the yard. And now, adieu moralizing, he leapt over the pales, and without any sort of scruple demolished his prize in an instant. In the meanwhile, a plump mouse, which ran out of the stable, totally put to flight our cat's philosophy, who fell to the repast without the least commiseration. Lesson: it is a common habit to talk of what is right and good, and to do what is quite the reverse. The Ape and the Carpenter. An ape sat looking at a carpenter who was cleaving a piece of wood with 2 wedges, which he put into the cleft one after another as the split opened. The carpenter, leaving his work half done, the ape must needs try his hand at log splitting, and coming to the piece of wood, pulled out the wedge that was in it without knocking in the other. The wood, closing again, held the poor monkey by his forepaws so fast that he was not able to get away. The surly carpenter, when he returned, knocked the prisoner's brains out for meddling with his work. Lesson: it is easier to get into mischief than to get out again. The Woodcock and the Mallard. A woodcock and a mallard were feeding together in some marshy ground at the tail of a mill pond. "Lord," said the squeamish woodcock, "in what a voracious and beastly manner do you devour all that comes before you! Neither snail, frog, toad, nor any kind of filth can escape the fury of your enormous appetite. All alike goes down without measure and without distinction. What an odious vice is gluttony!" "Good lack," replied the mallard, "pray how came you to be my accuser? And whence has your excessive delicacy a right to censure my plain eating? Is it a crime to fill one's belly, or is it not indeed a virtue rather to be pleased with the food which nature offers us? Surely I would sooner be charged with gluttony than with that finical and sickly appetite on which you are pleased to ground your superiority of taste. What a silly vice is daintiness!" Thus endeavoring to palliate their respective passions, our epicures parted with a mutual contempt. The mallard, hasting to devour some garbage, which was in reality a bait, immediately gorged a hook through mere greediness and oversight, while the woodcock, flying through a glade in order to seek his favorite juices, was entangled in a net, spread across it for that purpose, falling each of them thus a sacrifice to their different, but equal, foibles. Lesson: a voracious appetite and a fondness for dainties equally distract our attention from more material concerns. The Swallow and the Serpent. A swallow, returning from abroad and ever fond of dwelling with men, built herself a nest in the wall of a court of justice, and there hatched 7 young birds. A serpent, gliding past the nest from its hole in the wall, ate up the young unfledged nestlings. The swallow, finding her nest empty, lamented greatly and exclaimed, "Woe to me, a stranger, that in this place, where all others' rights are protected, I alone should suffer wrong." Lesson: do not place too great confidence in outward form.